Okay, I forgot that we actually had a stepwise system that we had kind of established here for good critical thinking. So I do want to go over each step with you and talk about the kind of practical use for each one, if you agree with the list. And actually, some of these, even when I was going over them, call back to previous conversations we've had. Like the first one was just kind of know what kind of problem you're dealing with. And this kind of comes back to my philosophy of, I guess we didn't really build it out in this discussion yet, but like, comparing a question you're trying to solve or a claim that you're trying to assess categorically with other claims like that in the past that you've dealt with, just so you kind of know, like let's say you went to school for, like this kind of hit me when I took a class on neuroscience and like actual specific research into neuroscience, because they were like, here's a concept, find all of the research in the papers that you can on this concept and tell me how well we know about it today. So when you actually dig into that primary research and you see people who have dedicated their like lives or their jobs to figuring out a problem, and there's actual like investment on the line here, like not investment like necessarily dollars, but you know, they're actually, their reputation kind of relies on them being right about this. Then you see how hard these problems are to thoroughly think about. Like, and I almost think like maybe this is advice for students, is like everyone should have one factual, like scientific category that they know to its core level, like to the level of like, if a study came out tomorrow on that subject, they could tell you how it fits into that picture, just so that they know the work and the effort and the thoughtfulness that it takes to get to that level on one subject. And then when someone else tells them something about a different subject, they can assess how far that person is from that level of expertise, right? And this kind of comes back to your, like, I think the accreditation of a doctor or like someone like that is a heuristic for kind of identifying those people that doesn't always work perfectly. But if you are asking a doctor something medical and they give you this kind of hand wavy answer, you might want to say like, hey, like, I don't really know how to indicate this in a socially acceptable way. But you could say, hey, I understand what it takes to really get this.
Yeah,
like,
no, I get it.
Feel free to tell me if you don't.
Right.
Or like if you just have never looked into it or whatever.
So the application that I'll just jump in quickly on is, this is exactly what I'm planning on doing with my interview process or my screening process, which is, I don't want to ask you about stuff that I think you should know or that I think you want to know. I want to ask you about things that you actually think you know, right? Like, let's say you play video games. Like, okay, tell me about that video game. Yeah. I want to know every single detail of that video game from what you know and why you know it and how you use it.
There you go.
Because it doesn't matter to me that you don't know Python programming or this specific skill set or whatever. But the fact that you understand one thing to that degree means you have now the capability of getting to that level on any other subject.
Thing. Absolutely agree with you.
Right?
Yeah.
And that now just shows me your potential or your capability. And if you haven't done that yet, okay, maybe you don't know where that level is for yourself. And that's fine, but you should try and figure that out. So
yeah,
100%.
Or maybe something that you just haven't been hooked by something to get to that level, right?
Right. But I would argue that I think most people have an interest that they do care about enough that they've gone to that level on.
I think true.
The problem, I mean, this is just my anecdotal.
Yeah.
Like this is my theory. So now I should go out and measure it and find out the truth, which is what I'm about to do. So, but the real point is that, I think a lot of people do have that. And I think because our education system has never promoted the things that people actually care about, they promote what they think they should care about. It's like, I should take a history class or a geography class. Like, what if I don't care about that? Yeah. And now I get a 50 in it. You're telling me I can't do this, or I'm too stupid to go to university because I don't care about this one thing you told me to care about.
Yeah.
When we get to university, we are literally making a decision to not care about 99% of the things. And that's okay. But when we're in younger grades, like, we have to care about all these random things that I still don't care about. That doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, and that kind of rings home with me. There was another book. Maybe we should do the fucking bibliography at the end of this, because I'm going to be citing enough books that
you should do it.
I'll do it. I don't really feel like going into like who wrote what and whatever right now. But the book I was reading was about the flaws of the education system, and the guy was kind of saying, like, people go through 4 years of university and they take away very little of what they learn in that time. And I was like, okay, like, kind of waiting for him to drive home why that's important. Like, maybe it's just a matter of exposing people to a lot of information so that if they see, that's how they kind of find the thing that they like, right? Like, we're talking about how important it is to dive headlong into something, to know it at a deep level. Maybe universities or like high school even is just a way of saying, here's 300 things, like, maybe one of these will kind of appeal to you, right?
Right.
But so I was like, yeah, you know, maybe they don't really retain much of that information, whatever. Why is that important? And he actually made the point, like, right away that, yeah, it's not really that important unless you fail. Then all of a sudden it affects your entire life, right? And I was like, whoa. Like, it doesn't matter if you pass and you don't remember what you learned to pass the course. But if you don't pass a bunch of those courses, even though they're, like, admittedly teaching you information you're not going to remember, your life course actually does significantly veer off schedule.
Right.
Right? And like that, like, I was like, damn, he's actually right.
Yeah, that's crazy though, right?
Yeah. And he's like, oh, as a professor, I have a huge impact on your life course. And I was like, what are you talking about? You just said we don't remember what you teach. And he's like, yeah, but I can fail you. And I was like, what? You son of a bitch.
That's nuts, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, imagine being, like, a highly capable person and, you know, being on track to be, like, someone who gets hired to, I don't know, McKinsey or something, to be kind of a successful consultant who, like, applies your intelligence somewhere, and you failed history. Yeah. And that's the deciding factor on your transcript about whether you get into this training opportunity to get you this job or...
Right.
Yeah. Like, it is not unimportant.
Which is crazy even now that I'm thinking about it after you're saying it. It's like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I know now that I don't care about at all.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even consider that. You do remember, you just wish you didn't.
Well, yeah. And it's like, I was lucky that I was like in my little tunnel vision mode of like, I just need to get good marks on everything and not have thought about this, because if I had thought critically and realized, oh yeah, I don't like this at all, like I don't care about whatever, like maybe that would have affected everything and all my marks would have been shit the bed or whatever.
That absolutely affected me in high school.
Which is crazy. Like, yeah, which is unfortunate. Like, why? I don't understand why it needs to be like that, right?
I mean,
arguably kind of why we're here.
Yeah. Right? No, that's absolutely why we're here. Okay, let's go on to number 2.
Yeah.
Because, I just wanted to make one last time.
Number 1. We've been here for like 3 hours. We're on number 1. We're on number 2.
This recording's going to be way longer than we thought it was going to be. We should have a contest. Like, if you listen this long, you get like a treat or something.
I mean, if you even hear this one part of it, then yeah.
I will personally, like, is there a way we can establish who's actually listened up to this point instead of just like skip to it?
I mean, we won't put a tag on this one piece, so
maybe. Fine. Okay. So you have to find it by
have to find it. Yeah.
Okay. If anyone listens to this, like, I'm gonna make this commitment right now because I don't really give a fuck. But I will buy you a Kit Kat in the flavor of your choice for free and send it to you.
There are multiple Kit Kat flavors.
There's so many.
What?
Yeah. There's like green tea and like all this kind of stuff now.
Really?
And I think there's like shrimp. There's some really weird ones.
There's a pandemic happening right now, and they're still making this kind of shit.
That's why they're making it. What the fuck else do you have to do than try all the different kinds of Kit Kats?
So I've been doing the pandemic wrong this whole time.
You don't have 10 Kit Kats in you? What am I supposed to eat after this?
We only drink. We don't eat.
What? That's okay. I'm fat enough.
It's carbs. It's just, yeah.
Anyway, literally eat, like, whatever, email DTFC or I hope your inbox fucking blows up.
I hope so too.
I will send each and every one of you a personal Kit Kat.
That sounds nice.
If you make it this far in this fucking recording.
Okay. I hope we go viral on this.
Jeez, I hope we don't. The brokest viral man on earth sent a Kit Kat to 300 million subscribers. Okay. I wanted to call out Liam here because I think Liam made the point on an earlier recording that he used a lot of his hobby time to dig deep into problems, and that the transferability of that helped him solve problems that he was able to identify as similar in structure in the future, right? And I think academics have held out this hope that like being super literate or being good at chess would have this kind of life impact. I'm not sure those do. But I think the habit of developing different kinds of expertise is absolutely beneficial to that. So, credit to Liam, you motherfucker.
Alright, he won't get this far.
No Kit Kat for you, Liam. You skipped right to your call out, so you don't get shit. Yeah. So number 2, we kind of talked about already, which was like, once you identify the kind of problem you're dealing with, know what the solution in a perfect world would look like. So that if someone's giving you an answer, or if you are coming up with an answer, you can identify where you fall short from that perfect answer. Right. So we talked about counting the swans, right? Like if any random comes up to you and says, I know how many swans are on the earth, you want to know how they counted them, because you know that's the way to the answer. And the entire discipline of statistics is about how we can come up with perfect counts for things with limited information. So obviously people know how to kind of solve those issues. Number 3 was identify how information falls short from the perfect world. Talked about that already. Number 4 is identify key weaknesses in the information that you have. So again, that's kind of related to that gap, but it's also related to if somebody's kind of giving you their structure of reasoning and it doesn't make a lot of sense to you. So I'm going to refer to one more book here that's kind of about building arguments, and it talks about like if someone makes a claim. So if someone says something about the world and they're kind of saying, this is what I think is the truth about the world, and you're now responding with, okay, I'm going to assess your claim about the truth of the world, they'll say, okay, here's my evidence. Okay, and I think everyone is kind of familiar with that. Like if they say, okay, you think this is true, show me why you think it's true. But there's a third step that this author points out in this book that we're going to do in the bibliography that will probably never happen, where he says, it's not just about providing evidence. There's a third step where you have to explain why the evidence says what you think it says. So if someone says...
prove the evidence, basically.
Kind of. Like, why is the evidence relevant?
Right.
So they say, okay, red cars go faster. And their evidence is they saw a red car go faster. So you'd say, why is the fact that you saw that one red car go fast evidence that all red cars go faster? And immediately you're identifying logical gaps in how they're connecting the facts that they know.
Right.
Right? So I think that one book did a really great job of actually teaching how to build arguments and not just point out holes in things, because I do think there's a misconception that critical thinking is like how to debunk, right? Critical thinking is not debunking. Debunking is important and possibly a consequence of critical thinking, but critical thinking is establishing, again, how that model is falling short of the accurate model. And if debunking happens as a result because something that somebody said ends up being inaccurate, it is what it is.
But I guess, like, why is debunking the problem?
Debunking is not the problem. It's a problem when people, if you kind of say something to someone and they say, oh, well, if you had perfect information, you would know this. And you say, okay, like, how do we kind of take the next step to fill in that thing? And they just don't have any input on that. So it's not just, like, critical thinking is not just learning how to tell everyone why they're wrong. Basically,
right.
like even the steps that we followed so far would get you to that point. But the key is that it's the distance from the accurate representation that you're trying to fill in. It's not just trying to negate someone else's claim. Right? So it's easy if someone says, like, I think this is kind of true, or I think this is the right thing to do. And you say, well, this is like one reason why I think the opposite. And you're both just kind of stuck. Like, how does the conversation kind of proceed from there?
Right.
And if you don't have a model for how to answer that question correctly, as opposed to tell someone else why they're not answering it correctly, then you're not really making any progress.
Right.
And I think, like, this might not be familiar to you or the audience, but there's like a community out there called like skeptics. And I think they kind of blew up when religion was kind of a more common social topic. But like, my irritation with skeptics is they don't often have a positive model of the world. They have a firm understanding of why models can go wrong, but they don't have that replacement model of
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think that, like, if I was put it in my words, like, they're problem seekers or finders as opposed to solutions.
Yes, right. Yeah, don't tell me all these problems if you don't have the solution.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, that's nice. That's only half of it, or part of it, right?
Yeah, and I had a really kind of bizarre experience in the atheist kind of online community years and years ago, where when like Richard Dawkins and the God Delusion was very much a topic of discussion. And there was this community that was like a skeptical community, and they were excellent at debunking religious arguments. They were great at that. And then someone eventually was like, hey guys, like we kind of dealt with all these, like why don't we do something positive in the, like why don't we like put forth like a belief system now? Like we've already told people what we don't believe in. What do we believe in? And then the whole community broke down. Yeah. Because they all believe very different things.
Right.
And so that was for me a very informative episode.
Right.
Okay. So the fifth one, and this gets back to like what we started talking about hours and hours ago at this point. But it's like, okay, let's say someone gives you a model of the world and you've identified, kind of the mistakes in that model and where you would get more information if you wanted to make that model better. And this kind of step is pretty key, I think. It's actually asking yourself if you can answer the problem that you're having with the information that you have. Because like we said, you don't have any obligation to correct that model if it doesn't have any practical use for you. You can keep breathing and assuming that when you open your mouth and you're like, they are going in as what's kind of keeping you going, you don't have to question that necessarily if it's still working for you. So you do have to deploy that effort selectively. And you also have to say like, I could have more information about this issue if I needed to understand it at a perfect, like, small grain level, but you don't always need to do that.
Right.
Bam. Okay, so let's just get right to 6 and then we're done and then we can talk about what to do next. The sixth one is add information and repeat the process as necessary. So this is just iteration and checking your assumption against your facts against your assumptions.
Yep.
That's it. That's the process. That's critical thinking.
Sounds straightforward, man.
Think fucking critically.
So
you fuck.
The problem is, or the challenge might be, if we give them the template for critical thinking, are they now critical thinking, or are they just doing the same crap that everyone else has told them?
Well,
hey, here's this template of what to do. Just do that. So I don't want to critically think, so I'm just going to keep following this template of how to critically think.
I think our template's better.
Well, who's going to be able to disprove that or approve it?
Well, hey, if you can debunk the template, tell me how many Kit Kats you're going to fucking get in the mail.
Okay, there you have it. That's a good first step.
I don't know if anybody's ever critical thinking, or if that's even the right way to say that.
I think it is.
I think we already did that.
I think that's a technical term.
Yeah, okay. I think we did that in the first half.
Probably.
Yeah. Now, I think identifying biases is important. I think, knowing when to employ heuristics is important. But I do think you have to know that it's your obligation when you are critically thinking about a subject to get the facts, to put them together in a logical way, to be able to explain that, and to figure out why, to know throughout the process why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So don't like someone could know everything about stamps in the entire world, and that might end up being completely useless information, and that might not give them a better life orientation or make them emotionally satisfied. So choose your battles.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is the last topic or we're just going to keep going. Like, I have an open schedule, so
yeah, I can do too. Let's see where we're at. It's only been 2 hours, so
that's it. Okay. Well, Joe Rogan does 3.5, sometimes 4. So
yeah, he's high the entire time. You want to get high?
Do you have supply? Supply and demand, my friend.
Are we rhyming? Are we rapping?
Supply and demand.
You want to get high? You get supply. I'm supply. Okay, cut. Okay, I do have one last subject, but you go.
Okay.
You rant and rave for a little while.
I was thinking something, and I lost it.
I'm just gonna awkward pause for a bit.
Yeah, awkward pause.
Do you have anybody who can do music?
Yeah.
Do you actually?
Yeah.
Who? David?
Yes. I mean, I can do music. What music do you want?
I need, I'll show you the kind of music I have that I like for the intros and the cuts in these. I have access to a guy's kind of like recordings, but there's a finite number of them. But they're like perfect. They're really like they're catchy, and they use like memes and like pop culture references in them. And I think like when I listen to his podcast, I love it. I like when he's like, let's break time, I'm like, oh, what's the fucking beat gonna be this time? Cool. So I was hoping we could get somebody to do that, something like that for us.
Yeah. Well, I have David. I also have my cousin who's like, he has a recording company or whatever.
What?
Or like he's a rapper.
You a rapper cousin?
Yeah, man. Dude. We'll talk.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where was I going with this? Some are good.
I have the last subject. I'm so curious how this final subject is going to turn out because...
Okay, what was the last point you just made, number 6?
Number 6 was iterate or add more information where necessary and then repeat the process.
Right.
What is the problem? How do you solve those problems perfectly? How are you short of solving that problem? How are you short of solving that problem perfectly?
Okay.
What are some weaknesses in the information that you have? How far towards the solution to the problem can you get with the information that you have? And then number 6 is add information where necessary and repeat the process.
Okay, so the challenge I'm having recently, and I think it also applies to this, is not that the concept doesn't make sense, because I think everybody agrees critical thinking makes sense. I've had the same conversation about that with networking. Networking makes sense to people. Everything makes sense, at least theoretically.
How do you get them to do it?
Well, and the question to ask to get them to do it is, why should I care? Yeah. So like the same argument that we've been using this whole time about breathing. It's like, why should I care to breathe better?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know that I need to, and no one can explain to me why I should, so I'm not going to do it. Mm. And that's, to me, is like a fairly reasonable argument. It's like, I did the same thing. Like I literally just only updated my website now, a year and a half into having a business, because I had no need to have a good website before. Zero need.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it. That makes logical business sense to me. I'm not doing extra things that I don't have time for that are going to either cost me money or resources or whatever. So that argument I'm okay with. And I think that's the argument that a lot of students or a lot of people are making about anything. And critical thinking, I think, hits the list on that one. So Why should we care?
Okay, I have 2 answers to that. And actually that transitions into my last subject really well. I think that there's an emotional kind of component and like getting back to what we mentioned about orientation in the first half, but I'll get back to that because I think that the practical like business benefit of that is risk management. And again, this is the investor who's been successful for the last 3 years in a bull market saying, how do I not lose everything as soon as this goes bad, right? So I do think like even if you're winning, if you are successful, if you have a lot of eggs in that basket, then you need to recognize that losing all those eggs will return you to a state of not being successful, and that either preserving or growing that safely now that you've kind of made the progress should be a priority for you. So like I think you can probably state it in pretty reasonable business terms that like you don't ever want the solvency of your business to be like a live issue for you.
Sure. But I guess my only counter to that is, can I get there without having a loss or a negative or a downturn in my sales in a month? Example.
I honestly wish you could, and we didn't really get into the idea of like primary learning something through primary experience versus accepting somebody else's mistakes. So like putting that more simply, I think you could say that like smart people will not make the mistakes that other people have made. They'll learn from those, whereas less smart people will have to make them personally to learn from them. So I do think that like somebody who's well equipped to run a business will be looking for those kind of potholes and dodging them where other people have fallen into them, and that critical thinking is a great method towards doing that. Going a little deeper to that, like why should I feel when I wake up in the morning that I should like put some of my limited effort into critical thinking? I think it's quite hard if you haven't experienced the difficulty of getting something wrong. Mm-hmm. And I really think like of everyone, that's going to be our hardest audience members to convince is going to be people who have had things go well for them without doing this.
Right.
How to overcome that, I really don't know. Like, I really think you have to wait, and I think that you, as a critical thinker, have to commit to the concept that reality catches up. That's kind of something that I've decided to do the last few days. Mm-hmm. And even personally, like that had the effect for me of ejecting myself from certain conversations I was having online and elsewhere, and just saying, I'm not going to try to convince you anymore because I'm convinced the world will teach you that you're wrong eventually.
Right.
And if those people are comfortable absorbing that loss when it does inevitably happen, that's their call.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have any?
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't see any other way myself.
Yeah.
I'm looking for other ways. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, and maybe we'll return to that. Like, I'll give it a little more thought.
Yeah.
And so the number one thing, and I think that this might be personal, and I'd be curious to see how well this generalizes. So while you're all eating your Kit Kats, maybe think about how well this applies to you.
Sweet. Just for reference, they watched up until the Kit Kat part, got their email to get their Kit Kat. Stop listening.
Stop listening. Yeah.
Wait,
you know what? You get another fucking Kit Kat if you get it. No, I'm gonna stop.
I mean, double or nothing, right? Like, that's a real strategy.
This is the point of the podcast where I tell you I was lying all up until now. No, the first group should still get their Kit Kats.
Yeah.
But while you're kind of thinking about that, I think personally, to me, stepping into a digital world where so much information and potential was available to you is very anxiety inducing. And I think almost like this is probably not the best selling point for critical thinking, but I do think that, and I think you see this in informed people in general, maybe scientists sometimes. Once you have done the job of digging into that one subject to its core and knowing how much effort it takes to know something in and out that way, you realize how much information in the world is not coming from that place. And that can be utterly like destructive to you, because all of a sudden you have felt the comfort of perfect information and you realized you don't have that comfort anywhere else. And that's a whole other adjustment period to realize that like you have to trust your heuristics, right? And we just talked about the vaccine example. I had a talk with the doctor who gave me my second COVID vaccine today, and I said, I've tried to understand as much as I could about this process and how we've got here and why we're doing this. And I agree reasonably in my head, it's the right thing to do, but it makes me very, very anxious still, because I know, like, I can very easily imagine the person who has more information than me that would make a different decision, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, that gives me incredible anxiety. So I do think that critical thinking, like, as much as it's about spending time on certain topics to know them very deeply and like getting acquainted with that identity of being an expert on something, I do think that it's also about becoming comfortable that you've put those resources forth in the right way and that you're going to accept the facts or the claims about the world that you haven't had time to assess that way, and you're just going to have to emotionally deal with that. And so I do think that there's a phase where that can make you very anxious, but I also think that there's a phase where it's like, okay, I kind of know where my strengths are in the world and I know where the weaknesses are, and that makes you utterly relatable to everyone else in the world who also has strengths and weaknesses. And it can eventually bring you to a place of like a deep understanding about how and why people communicate and what they're trying to do, and filtering out the crap from social media and from advertising because you see through it, and just giving you this foundation of I always know where I am and what I'm about and what I know, and I will not, like, there's no reason to budge from that. Mm-hmm. I think that really gives you this like foundational confidence. Yeah,
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think the struggle that I'm seeing and it is crazy to me now, especially with social media, like you're talking about, that I swear, I don't know how many years ago it was, but like it was either a comedian or somebody said, oh yeah, like I saw this on the internet, aka the truth machine, and like we all laughed like ha ha ha, and like, you know how many people quote to me shit they see on Twitter or like facts or like, yeah, this happened, like I read it on Twitter. It's like I can't tell if you're being serious or not, and they are being serious.
Yeah,
it's like this used to be a funny joke that we all knew was a joke.
Oh Lord,
and this is where people get information from. And so like, sure, like, and this is, I think, the biggest challenge is like, yeah, we're talking about data and accuracy and measurement and all this stuff, but the facts that we're getting, air quote again, is from Twitter. It was like, they used to call it shitter. It's like, everybody knew that. Like, maybe only 5 people
Good
told
one,
that.
Guys.
I don't know, but whatever. It was pretty obvious. That was the logical, like, translation of the term. Like, but at the end of the day, I thought that was a very key point that people understood. But somehow we've forgotten that the internet used to be full of lies constantly, because you can write whatever you want on the internet and there is no fact checking.
Yeah.
And now that has become fact checking. It's like, well, I saw this on the internet, so that's how I fact check this. It's like, what? That's literally counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a terrible thing that's happening, that in the time that we potentially spend the least resources on developing critical thinking, we have the most bad information coming at people. And that gets back to the core confidence that comes from understanding what good information looks like. But it also gives us way more of a threat of an environment that's going to give people all the information they're already looking for and never challenge them to think critically. Like, I can already back up everything I think looking for a tweet that confirms it from somebody with 20 followers. So why would I think any further about it? And I do think like we're kind of a unique generation, because we remember before when that didn't exist, or when the internet was about long cats and I can has cheeseburger and not about who the next president is going to be.
Yeah.
Right? Or like some other political event happening. And the world has really shifted to the point that there's a new level of responsibility that we don't have to take individually, or we should, but that as people who are moderating and creating these spaces need to kind of understand what the function is. And people who are gung-ho about the possibility of free speech being a positive contribution to society need to rethink what this kind of arena of speech is doing today.
Right.
And honestly, this could really be a whole other recording. I do have a whole other book on this.
We don't have enough time.
No, we actually don't.
We never do.
We never, no. Like, we really don't today, because this is actually another subject that really, really irks me. And I think that there are people who are semi-thoughtful about this, like halfway thoughtful, who are like, oh, the best scenario is to get everyone's opinions in the same space. Everyone can say whatever they want, and they haven't adapted that belief to what that looks like today, when beliefs, like, the information out there is just out of control. Right. And like you said, there's absolutely been this flip between, like, we all knew that Twitter, like don't put your credit card information on the internet was the philosophy when we were in that age.
Right.
And now it's like, oh, like, you know, I should make this major life decision based on what someone I found on Twitter is doing.
Right.
And
like TLDR has become the new research strategy.
Yeah, it's how fast can I confirm my opinion,
exactly.
Right? And we haven't really talked about them today, but I know that they're like, we've talked about exercises in disconfirmation, right? Like, where can I be wrong? Another quick mechanism I'll throw out is like, if you are confident that something's true, you have a tendency to ask, can I believe this? So like, what is the least possible information I need to justify this belief?
Yeah.
Whereas if you are assessing something that you think is inherently wrong, your instinct is more like, do I have to believe this?
Right.
So like, where is the information that forces me to believe it? And you definitely have to be conscious, like, what are you trying to do, and what conception of your beliefs is that giving you?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I use those concepts when I'm trying to explain to people the concept of debugging, right? Which is basically, okay, we have a problem in software or whatever it is, or just a problem in general, and we're trying to solve it. And you start Googling stuff and you're like, okay, well, Google's my best friend. It's going to give me all the answers, and it can give you all the answers, but you have to learn how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And if you ask terrible questions, Google's just going to give you a bunch of shitty information that does not help you solve that problem at all. And again, it's quantitative, because like, clearly the error or the bug or the problem still exists. So it doesn't matter that you Googled, like, I Googled something. It's like, yeah, that's nice, but it didn't solve the problem. So what are you going to do now?
Right.
You have to Google something else.
Need more information, step 6.
Exactly.
There's one other thing that made me think of. What is kind of a solution on this like broad kind of societal scope? And I think that this is another kind of final habit I just want to close on, that people kind of, another kind of throw your hands up in the air solution. That, everybody's reasoning is kind of motivated towards accepting their own biases, so there is no real way around that. And that there's actually one really valuable solution that I found to get around that. And it's that direct your biases towards towards the tools and the skills that are going to lead you more reliably towards truthful beliefs. So if someone is, let's say, if someone wants to be informed about a subject, they'll follow someone on Twitter who is often like tweeting about that subject, for example. I follow people on Twitter who I can visibly see are thinking or using the tools and skills that I've been talking about in this episode. so that I know if I know nothing about a subject, but I follow their path of reasoning, it will make sense to me. It will demonstrate and qualify the conclusions that they're kind of coming to. And I can feel like we're kind of coming from the same place in terms of how we would have figured out that problem. And there are times when I will uncritically accept a belief that one of them has come to using that method. But the reason I do that is because I'm confident that they followed the method and I believe in the outcome of the method, right? So I'm not saying that I go through and like perfectly analyze all my beliefs, but I try to associate with other people I know are doing, like using the same tools and the skills that I think are powerful.
Right.
And if I'm going to blindly believe something, it'll be something that has come from one of them or followed that method before.
Right.
And I think you can instinctively say, like, you can train yourself to be that reactive douchebag and say, no, you're wrong. But the reason that you're going to supply for why that person's wrong is now actually a good reason. Right. Mm-hmm. And you know, like anybody in any position can be obnoxious about what they think. But I do think if you're going to take, like, if your resources are limited and you need to get to some beliefs faster than others, then you should at least have this kind of way of getting to beliefs that have been derived in the right way. Mm-hmm. So motivated reasoning still happening, but now you're motivated towards better reasons.
Right.
Bam.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're not unmotivated to do something, like, you're never going to do it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to find that motivation. And I think that's the struggle, is like, well, we can get that 9 times out of 10 result with very little thinking. So what's motivation? And I think that's a fair argument, unfortunately.
The cost of the 1 out of 10.
Right. And I mean, hopefully you have a point in that those people will feel that 1 out of 10 at some point, and
just don't
change
get grifted.
Mind.
Like, there's scammers and there's grifters out there who are looking to take advantage of those people who are just sitting there relying on the 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
And the harm might be imperceptible.
Yeah.
It might be I spend $10 on the wrong thing, but over time, like, you're just wasting your life.
Yeah. Well, so this is and I mean, the most interesting example is still going back to the stock market, is 9 out of 10. And I think, like, the argument you can use, again, just goes back to math, is like 9 out of 10 can work if your reward to risk ratio is high.
Yeah.
If you have a really high risk and a really small reward, 9 out of 10, you still lose. Right. And if you don't understand that, and we'll have to like put a footnote with like a math example here to actually explain this numbers. But like, realistically, the point is you can win 1 really big win and lose 9 really small wins, or 9 really small losses, and you still come out ahead.
Yeah.
But if you have 9 really small wins and 1 really big loss, like, that can wipe out all your small wins.
Yeah. And this is reality catching up. Right? Like, reality will take revenge on you if you are not repairing your model over time. And whether that happens to you individually or it happens to a society dealing with a crisis that they have convinced themselves would never happen.
Right. And I guess to sum it up, if you don't critically think, you'll never figure out whether those 9 out of 10 wins are big wins or little wins. And if you don't worry about that and you don't think about it, okay, good luck. Right?
Yeah, and the rest of the world will be convincing you to be that way, right? So
exactly.
Fucking lucky we're telling you not to.
Yeah. Too bad you have to listen to 4 hours of this.
Yeah, sorry it took so long. Sorry, not sorry.
It's all right. If you got your Kit Kat, you're
yeah, you got a Kit Kat. I had a great time.
You're winning right now, by far.
Ooh, that's a good point to end on. Oh, I can't wait to listen to this again.